there, Photo Universe. Okay, as here we are, middle of April 2016, and past couple of months have been sort of a revelation to me. You know, you guys know I'm always reevaluating what I'm doing, and I don't know. I've been on this quest for years, trying to find a camera a digital camera that does something for me. And that I want to shoot with, that I want to shoot with like I used to shoot with my film cameras. I still, you know, every once in a while I pull out my, I should have brought it out here, you know. Every once in a while I pull out my 1976 Pentax MX. And I look at it and, like, you know, if I wanted to shoot film, like, that camera had it all. It had everything I needed. It was perfect. It was manual focus, it was manual exposure, there was the light meter in it. So it was a lot like a SLR Leica M6. And, you know, that camera inspired me, and it really made me want to photograph. There's no arguing. I mean, this is a very emotionally, people get really passionate about gear. I mean, because we're at a point now where the choices are unbelievable. It's I mean, it used to be pretty clear cut. You know, 35mm could make you 8x10s, and on a regular basis. Gale and Rowell, which, by the way, I don't know whether you've seen that in the background over there. That's an original Gale and Rowell, by the way. That I bought that back in the 90s, and it's a numbered, signed Gale and Rowell, and God knows what it's worth. But I'm glad I bought it. You know, I would never sell it. It's I enjoy having it. But I mean, he was really pushing it with Kodachrome to 16x20s from 35mm. Brilliant, and he did it. You know, because it was the content, more content and subject matter, and his technique and skill, and his vision and his eye were way more important than technical quality. You know. He made a career out of 35mm, never went bigger than 16x20. So, you know, here we are today where pretty much any modern digital camera can go 16x20 all day long, no problem, with quality rivaling the best medium format film cameras of the day. And so, you know, back then it used to be 35mm 8x10s all day long, 16x20s was pushing it. 11x14s was kind of pushing it if you had a lab. I mean, you know, only pro photographers could develop relationships with labs. I mean, I was in Portland, Oregon, and there were 3 or 4 pro labs. But if you didn't give them $5 grand worth of business a month, you know, it was hit or miss. I mean, it wasn't hit or miss. It was miss all the time. You would take your stuff in to get it printed, and it looked like crap, and you couldn't say anything because they weren't interested in listening to you. You know, and who had the money? I mean, I remember being broke. I could barely afford film. So that was a whole different ballgame. You know, and if you wanted ultimate technical, you know, but you know, with film it was very simple, because if you could trade, you know, technical quality for the ability to shoot. When I shot 4x5 film, I went from 35mm, you know, typical progression back then. You go from 35mm to medium format to 4x5. We were shooting weddings with medium format, so I was using it for landscapes. And then, you know, so a couple of my friends were shooting 4x5, and it was like, well, let me give that a try. And I did okay with 4x5, but, you know, when you go to 4x5, there's just, it limits you in terms of what you can actually photograph. Because you're shooting, you know, a normal lens on a 4x5 is 150 to 210mm. And you can only shoot, you know, you have to shoot it like f/16 to get any depth of field at all, or f/22. And that's what that was all about. You know, Ansel Adams was f/64. That was his, you know, his club that he made back in the 30s or 40s. So, you know, so here we are today, where you can get a APS-C camera. It'll give you 16x20s all day long. 20x30s are no problem. 16 megapixels, 24 megapixels, no problem. Particularly without the AA filters. And full frame, you know, 36 megapixel full frame, 40x60s. So, you know, fine art quality. So, you know, and you reach a point where it's like, okay, where do I want to be on this thing? Well, what it comes down to, like, I can shoot pretty much any camera to do what I want to do. And what do I need to do? Well, there's, you know, there's the stuff that I'd like to do for my personal work, but then now I have a job photographing weddings and bridal portraits and things like that. So, I mean, honestly, what do I need to do on a regular basis? I need to do 12 by 18s. Okay, so, I mean, and that's all day long APS-C. Heck, I could use micro four thirds. No problem at all. Okay, for 12 by 18s. So as you guys know, you've seen me go through different systems, and it came to a crescendo having to actually book weddings and do jobs again, which I haven't done for 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years on a regular basis. And so, you know, I've been jumping around, and you know, it's very simple to say, okay, I'll just go get a Canon 6D or a Nikon D810 or D750, put it all on program and shoot. But you know, and I've done that, and it's very uninspiring, and it's very lazy, because you kind of, you know, your pictures turn out great, but they're boring because you don't put any thought into it. The camera does the focus for you. You don't have to think about anything. The camera does the focus and the exposure. There's no mistakes, but there's also no creativity. I mean, you know, in theory, and this is all well and good, and I hear what people are thinking right now. They're saying, well, you know, you could take a D750 and you put it all on manual and be as creative as you want. Yeah, you could, but you don't, do you? Right? I mean, you know, you're in a hurry, and so you just turn on all the automation and you click away. And don't get me wrong, there are legions of young 20-year-old girls that got Canon Rebels for Christmas that take great photographs, you know, technically great photographs, that think they're professionals. They're on Facebook, and you can book them to shoot your wedding all day long. They don't have a clue. They don't know what flash is. They don't know how it works. They don't know how an f-stop is related to flash. No, they're not photographers, you know, but they're utilizing the technology to eliminate the hard parts and do the job. Okay. And maybe to a certain extent there's some wisdom in their magic, in their thinking, because they're not worried about all those f-stops and apertures and all that crap. Screw that. I don't need to know how it works. I just need to be creative. So they're putting more emphasis on the creativity and less emphasis on the technique and technology, and not technology, but technique or science of photography. And some of them are turning out decent work. I mean, God forbid something goes wrong, and I'm not 100% sure they have real creative control over their craft, but whatever. But what's a guy like me to do, who spent years learning f-stops and film developing and exposure and dynamic range and depth of field, shutter speed, etc., etc., etc. Okay. I mean, for me, there has to be, you know, my photographs, my creativity is better, is higher when my brain's engaged. And it's really ironic that that it took jumping back a generation of cameras to get me to that point. So what am I on about here? Well, when the Fuji X-Pro1 originally came out, the camera was, I mean, it was expensive for what it was, and it was one of these things, it was almost like a beta test. It was like, it was one of these things where, like, yeah, this is so thinking outside the box and so cool. It's basically the camera, it's the M camera that Leica should have made, but they never did. And but it was flawed. The autofocus on Fuji 1.0 X-Pro1 was horrible. And even when the autofocus was off and you were outside and pointing the camera around, the thing was chattering. I mean, the lens, the aperture was, it was weird. There were some real flaws to that camera. And, you know, back when I originally first got into Fuji, I picked up, and this is it, the original X100S. I've kept this camera all along. I really enjoyed the hybrid viewfinder. And I was like, man, if the X-Pro1 was only as good as the X100S, it would be like the perfect camera. But it wasn't, and I dismissed it, and it's all documented. I mean, I have videos where I really wanted to love that camera. But in theory and in practice, it just wasn't there, okay? The X100S really isn't there either, but it's just good enough, okay? I photographed wedding with this back in January, and the autofocus, I mean, you know, you're taking shots and you're like, oh, please don't give me the red box. I want this shot. And you get the red box a lot with this camera, which is interesting. So anyway, up on the web, I read, you know, I've been thrashing around, and I really enjoy the Fuji cameras, but, and I was thrashing around reading a whole bunch of stuff, and I came across this blog by Bradley Hanson, bradleyhanson.com. What a nice guy, and what an interesting history. Dyed-in-the-wool film shooter, no question about it. I mean, really expert on processing film and shooting film. Leicas, you know, the whole deal. And he was saying that the X-Pro1 had evolved. And sort of out of desperation, I said to myself, you know, and here's the thing, I have an XE2S here, okay, which is a very, you know, I really like the XE2 form factor, the smallness. And it's a great camera. And the automation on it is just enough where you kind of let the automation do it. And you don't really have to think about it as much with the eye focus and the face focus and all this, okay? And that's interesting. And I've had XT1s, and you know, the electronic viewfinder is nice to have, but I always said, man, if I could get the hybrid viewfinder, because I really prefer to shoot with the optical viewfinder on my X100S, but it's nice every once in a while when I have a difficult situation, switch over real quick to that electronic viewfinder and just check what I'm doing. And I said to myself, you know, Bradley Hanson says the X-Pro1 has evolved. And concurrent with that recently in the X-Pro2 release, X-Pro1's dropped to $500 US dollars. And I said to myself, you know, for $500, everything has a price. Let's, you know, maybe with firmware 3.5, the X-Pro1 is as good as the X100S. Let's give it a try. So I sent off for an X-Pro1. This was about 4 weeks ago. And right out of the box, it was like, dang, this thing's focusing. You know what? This thing's better than the X100S. How? How did Fuji do that? I mean, I am really suspicious of the fact that, like, so evidently with Fuji serial numbers, the first 3 digits, well, the first 2 digits is the year and the quarter. So if you have a 2-1, that was made in 2012 first quarter. That was one of the first ones they ever made. The letter after the first 3 digits is which market the camera was made for. The M or N or something is Europe, but A is the USA. So my X-Pro1 that I just recently purchased is a 5.4A. And that means it was made in 2015 last quarter. So this was made in October, November, December of 2015. And, you know, I'm just suspicious, and I'm not saying this is a fact, this is just a wishful thinking on my part. I'm suspicious that, you know, this was Fuji's flagship. Maybe they upgraded the parts inside. I don't know. Maybe they upgraded the hardware. But all I can tell you is the original X-Pro1, when I had an X-Pro1 alongside this X100S, the X100S was at least twice as good in terms of autofocus as the original X-Pro1. And I was kind of hoping when I ordered this X-Pro1 that the autofocus would be, with the new firmware 3.5, or now we're up to 3.6, at least as good as the X100S. And I can tell you right now, it's at least twice as good as the X100S. And this X100S is running latest firmware. So it's just faster, it's more accurate. I mean, is it Nikon D4? No. No, it never will be. And even the X-Pro2 isn't that. That's not what Fuji's about. Okay? And I get that. It's different philosophy. I mean, would it be nice if it would be? Yeah, maybe. But the point is, in what I need it to do, it's 100%. Okay? And how I set this up and how I use this is I use it on the center box for most of my shots. And I even thought, like, okay, if it's as good as the X100 does, a lot of people talk about back button focusing, where you set the camera to manual, and you set the button in the back so that it focuses. So you pre-focus, and this way you can just take the shutter when what happens, happens. And I figured, well, I'll do that. Let's try that. And in shooting bridal portraits and the stuff that I shot recently, I shot this X-Pro1, I tried it for a few, and you know what? The half button focusing is fast enough. It works. Every shot I can refocus. It's not a problem. And the only caveat is, as Bradley Hanson mentions in his blog, which I kind of do anyway because that's the way autofocus always was, and I guess it's not anymore with these hybrid cameras like the XE2, XE2S, and XT1, in terms of that they have the phase detection and the contrast detection. But I've always looked for a line, because autofocus cameras from back in the film days, you always needed some kind of a line, a vertical or horizontal. It was more sensitive to vertical or horizontal. That's why Canon puts the X sensors in, so that you can have it has more of a chance of catching something. To the point where people don't even think about it anymore. They just point and shoot. With this, I kind of have to catch a line, but I kind of do that anyway. So to me, it's not an issue. The real key is when I do catch a line, how good is it? Real good, in really dark light, like professionally usable good. If you deviate from that, see, to me, as long as this allows me to shoot the way I want to shoot, I'm good. Okay? If you set this so that to the wide and let it pick it, you're done. It's too slow. It's never going to happen. You just don't shoot that. Pretend that doesn't exist. Okay? You're much better off. But on the other hand, you've got the 49 focusing points all over the frame. So if I'm doing a portrait, I just real quickly move where I want it. Click, click, click. Now I'm focusing on the eyes. Beautiful. So another thing that originally freaked me out about the X-Pro was I'm used to DSLRs where you take the picture through the viewfinder and you take the camera down and the image shows up on the back. And one of the things that annoys me, so this camera's not fast enough to do that. What happens is you take the picture, and if you have it set to chimp so that it displays the image for 1.5 seconds, what'll happen is it'll show it in the viewfinder. If you take it down from your eye, the camera's not fast enough processing where it'll show up on the back. Well, I thought about that for a second, and I said, well, now wait a minute. I don't chimp all the time. I do with a DSLR just because it's there. But it's not something, I kind of don't need to do that. I'd rather not do that, but I do it because it can. But I'd rather not do that. I know it sounds funny, but what, okay, but with this camera, what it is turned to chimping off. Because I had to push the button, the playback button anyway to see it on the back screen. I said to myself, well, now wait a minute, what if I just turn chimping off, and this way it doesn't switch over to the EVF, and it doesn't show me the image for 1.5 seconds. I just carry on shooting. I'll take a shot, and I know if I want to chimp it to see if I'm there, and that's maybe 1 in 20. So 1 in 20, I take the camera down, I hit playback, bam, there's my shot on the back screen. That works so much better for me. I learned this with this camera. That works so much better for me now that with my Pentax, And all my other cameras and my XE2S, because the XE2S is fast enough processing, you take it down, your image is on the back for 1.5 seconds, that I turn this image display off, and then I'll push the button. It's better. It's actually speeded up my workflow. So now y'all saying, well, the X-Pro1 is slow. Only if you want to use it in a particular way. If I take a picture and I want to chimp that picture, and I take the camera down and I push the back button, it's not slow. It's right there. Okay. I just can't. If you want to work in such a way where you take a picture and you take it down and look at it, the X-Pro1's not going to work for you. But here's the upshot of it all. This camera makes me want to photograph. This camera gets me excited about photographing again. All right. And there's a simplicity here, even though it's a digital, very complicated digital camera, there's a simplicity here. And there's a simplicity to the workflow. It's not the camera for everyone. And it's not a camera that one size fits all. This is a camera that if you want to work in a particular way where you're engaged in where your brain's engaged in taking the photograph, it doesn't get in your way. And something about this camera now has clicked with me. No pun intended. There's something about the X-Pro1. Another thing about, one of the things that I was worried about with Fuji cameras is their longevity and their longevity, their durability. And evidently Bradley Hansen had 3 of these that he shot with for the past 4 years, 3.5 years. He's got 125,000 exposures on each one, and they're still going strong, not a problem. Never had a problem. That and Roger Ciala at Ren's Lentils, Lens Rentals, say that 3 times fast, has actually taken apart a 50 to 200 millimeter, 55 to 200, the 3545 or 4.8 or whatever it is, and he said that he's very impressed with the build quality. You see the tear down of that, and he said the lens is made like a $1,500 lens, like definitely like more like a Zeiss lens than a cheap consumer grade lens. He said this lens has features on it that we don't see in lenses under $1,000. And it's a $700 lens that you can get when Fuji runs their sales for $500. So I'm at the point now where, like, I was worried about, like, you buy a Nikon D810 and some Nikon lenses, man, you hammer nails. Or the pro stuff from Nikon. I mean, just, you know, use it for a sledgehammer, no problem. But with the Fuji stuff, it's kind of, I mean, it's sort of lightweight, and it was kind of, you know, but the reports are coming in now that, like, Fuji, like, really did the right thing. This is pro gear. So that's where I'm at with the X100. It's X-Pro1, I'm sorry. It's more so, I mean, here's an XE2S. And there's got to be, okay, as far as the XE2S is, there's got to be a firmware glitch or something when they change the firmware, because the problem I'm having now with this camera is that, this is XE2S, okay, is that when I like to shoot with the eye sensor because I like to see the data in the back. So I have my camera set to see the data in the back. When I bring this camera up to my eye, the eye sensor takes like 1.5 to 2 seconds to turn on. I'm missing shots because the eye sensor is too slow. And it wasn't like that on the XE2, and it's not like that on the XT1. I can set the X-Pro1 to EVF on, and the eye sensor is faster. Let me set it. Okay, there's the EVF on, there's the back. Bam, there's, you know, and that's moving a mechanical blind in. And it's X-Pro1, it's a 4-year-older camera. X100S is faster, to the point where you bring it up to your eye, you take the shot. With the XE2S, you bring it up to your eye, and you wait, and now you can take the shot. And it's just enough so you miss the shots. So what I'm trying to say is I got this X-Pro1, and at the first day or two I had to work around the chimping thing, and then I realized, you know what, I like shooting this way better. So not only I had a workaround for one thing, and it turned out that I preferred it. The XE2S, which is one of the newest cameras they have out, it's a refresh of the XE2, I have to work around this viewfinder. That's a flaw. And if I shoot this at a wedding or a professional job, I have to turn it to EVF on 100% of the time, so that I can pull up to my eye and the EVF's on and I got a shot. The eye sensor function is not working in the XE2S. And so the XE2S has become sort of a backup. One of the other reasons I have the XE2S is because of the deal that they have, where you get the 18 to 55 lens for like $300 if you buy the XE2 body. So, but that's okay. I think the XE2, if you buy the XE2S kit, and that makes you know, if you paid $500 for the 18 to 55, you get the XE2S for $500. So for $500, the XE2S is worth having around as a backup, whatever. And also I can set it to, it's a little faster on all automatic, so I can let my wife shoot that. But the upshot of it all is, I enjoyed the X-Pro1 so much that for $500, like 2 weeks later, I bought another backup body at $500. And so I'm pretty much set right now. And I know you've heard this before, but like, yeah, I can tell. I'm good. Believe it or not. With all the cameras that I've had, it's taken me like a month before I made this video because I want to be sure where I was at. And like, there's no question about it now. I'm set. I'm good with the X-Pro1 for a while. And the other thing is I'm sure the X-Pro2 is great, and it's a place to go someday, maybe when the price comes down. But there's, you know, somebody said, and I read this recently, that, you know, the key to modern technology is when they simplify it down to the point where you're left with everything you need, instead of a bunch of crap you don't. And the X-Pro2, it needs a deal where you push the function button and you can set the ISO. That turn and twist ISO setting deal is very, very complicated way to do something very simple that they didn't need to do. They made it, the key to the X-Pro series is simplicity, or transparent simplicity. And that dial is mechanically complex to accomplish something that's more cumbersome than just pushing a button and nailing your ISO immediately. Because the way I shoot is I shoot on auto ISO like all the time, and then when I need a specific ISO, I want to nail it right away. And with the X-Pro2, I haven't seen one yet, but the reports from other people are it's cumbersome. And I'll tell you right now, the X-Pro1 is not cumbersome to set the ISO. You nail the function button, bam, I get my ISO immediately, I'm away with the mixer. The other thing is, people complain about the diopter and these little lenses off the back on the X-Pro1. Well, my eyesight's not what it used to be. I can see anything from 2 feet to infinity perfectly, but I'm having trouble with the close vision as you get older, and so I wear glasses for that. But I don't need, like, whatever this, I guess it's -1 is the standard diopter. I'm good with that on the X-Pro1. But I will tell you right now, if I needed a different diopter, if this was not clear to me, I would just get, I mean, it's the Nikon diopters. They've been making them for years. They're readily available. It's a pro thing. You used to always have to go get your lens that you needed. It's not a big deal because you only have to get it once. You find the diopter, you find out what you need to dial in, and you dial it in. I mean, it's not a big deal. You dial it in, you get the lens, you screw it on there, and you forget about it. And you never have to mess with it again. And that's wonderful. I think that's a lot better solution. That's a pro solution. The diopter wheel, like it is on the XE2, embedded in the back of inside the camera on the side of the viewfinder is fine. I got no problems with that. The diopter wheel on the outside edge where cameras get banged around a lot, I mean, people are reporting like just taking it out of their camera bag, their diopter's getting misadjusted. That's or maladjusted, whatever. That's fine, but also like your strap's gonna rub against it, and and your camera's gonna get banged on. You know, having a delicate wheel on the outside corner of a camera seems to me like a poor design choice. So that's my, some of the things on the X-Pro2 that I have reservations about, personally. I'm sure the X-Pro2 is great, but for right now and for the foreseeable future, I'm good with the X-Pro1. The other thing is the X-Pro1 just has a way, the original X-Trans sensor just has a way of rendering the images that it's got a really beautiful look to it. The X-E2, X-Trans 2 sensor, and now X-Trans 3 has a more digital look to it. The original X-Pro sensor has more of a film look to it. It's more organic. It's less digital. That's extremely and highly subjective, but it's preferred. So for me, anyway, I like it better. So that's the other thing. I really like the sensor in the X-Pro1. So I still have Pentax gear. I hate to say it, I'm not using it professionally. By the way, that image was shot with a cactus flash and an umbrella and some window light. Simple lighting setup. Cactus flash works wonderfully well. These Fujis with the the 5612 and all that, it's pretty much I'm shooting ambient light now with ISO 6400 and 3200 for dark stuff. I mean, the days of flash wedding photography are kind of done. And if you're doing serious portraits, you throw a cactus up there. And if I get into a situation where I'm in dark reception and people are dancing, throw the cactus on a pole in the corner, bam, done. So it's a different way of shooting. Much lighter, no flash. I mean, I have that video where I have that flash and somebody said, God, what a complicated contraption. Yeah, damn right it was. That ain't happening. That's why I got the cactus. Slip the thing in the little cactus controller here, dial it in, I'm done. Everything the manual, fantastic. So that's where I'm at moving forward. Professionally, I'm shooting X-Pro1s with a X100S. So what do I got? I got two X-Pro1s, an X100S, an XE2S. I have the Samyang 12 great lens. I have the 18 to 55 and the 50 to 200 or 55 to 200. And then I have the 56 and the 35 f2. And I'm waiting for the 23 f2. But right now I'm shooting my 23 millimeter f2 on my X100S for my 23. And surprisingly, a lot of these bridal portraits were shot with the 18 to 55 on the X-Pro1. I thought the X-Pro1 was going to be a prime only camera, but I really enjoy shooting the zoom for work on the X-Pro1. The way those frames, I mean, I've shot Leica before, and you put a zoom on the X-Pro1 and the frame lines, the OVF, the optical viewfinder, the frame lines shrink down. That's brilliant. And if I need to, I switch over to EVF if I really want to be precise with it. I really enjoy shooting it. So it's less of, the X-Pro1 has allowed me to be less about the gear and more about the craft, more about the engaging the brain, and it's gotten the digital stuff added away for me. And that's a beautiful thing. Also, I love the fact I can use these beautiful leather straps. I can take the camera, throw it in the bag, throw the strap right on top of it, and I don't have to worry about anything metal scratching up the camera. This is a cam-in. I got off Amazon. Nice leather, Latigo leather, and it was like 25 bucks. And these straps I made myself. I went down to Joann's Fabric and I got some leather. The leathers, I wish I could get this like leather, Latigo leather, which is finished on the inside, but this is nice. It's okay leather. And and no big deal. Just stitched it myself, and there it is. I kind of pretty much copied the cam in. So, but I love these thin leather straps. They're lightweight, and they just, you know, I don't have to worry. There's no metal on them. I don't have to worry about them scratching up the camera. The one thing I did do on the XE2 is I have the inexpensive Sunway Photo Grip. I like it because I can get to the memory card and I can get to the battery real quick. On the X-Pro1 for shooting for, you know, weddings and stuff, I have the inexpensive. This is newer. The X-Pro1 metal. It's an L bracket, but I don't use the L. I just use it for the grip and for the Arca Swiss on the bottom because I want to go on a tripod. And the only problem with this is I actually need to use a Leatherman to extract the SD cards. The battery's going in and out real easy, but the SD card's recessed enough that I have to use my Leatherman to get the card out. Now, having said that, I use a 64 gigabyte. Oh, and maybe that's something to consider also. With the X-Pro1, believe it or not, you need to use a fast card. So I'm running these, it helps a lot. It makes the camera, if you're using a slow card, I don't know what would happen, but these are a 95, these are PNY Pro Elite 95 read, 90 writes. And it's totally fast enough. And 64 gigabytes, when I go to a wedding, I shoot about 1,000 images, and I shoot RAW plus fine JPEG. I pretty much use the fine JPEGs, but if I need to go to the RAW, I have it as a backup, and I can get like 1,500 or 1,600 images on one card, and for me that's not a problem at all. I don't need two cards that hold, you know, anytime you're going to have a problem, it's swapping cards. Any problems I've ever had have been swapping cards. So if I minimize the swapping cards and then I come home and I put them into the card reader in the computer and make like 4 copies, right away when I come home from the wedding, I've never had a problem. I've shot 100 weddings that way over the past 10 years, digital. So no more than that. Jeez, I shot 100 weddings in Texas. Probably shot 250 weddings that way. I've never had a problem. Kevin Mullins, talking about the X-Pro 2, said like he likes having the 2 cards, but he doesn't use them. He prefers using one big card. He uses 256 gigabytes. Good God. And that's, you know, I run out of batteries. And that's another thing about the X-Pro, about the Fuji system in general. I have 4 batteries for the X100S, and I have 12 or 13 batteries for X-Pro1 for the XE, for this series, the X series. And you know, because I get about 250 shots at a portrait session per battery, about 300 on the X-Pro, about 300, yeah, 350 around now. I calculate about 250 per battery, so I want to be well covered. You know, I use a mixture of original Fujis and the Wasabi and the big mics and from Amazon. They're inexpensive, and that's one thing. You know, I would rather swap batteries than carry around a big battery in the camera. Keep the camera light. So for me, that works no problem. But definitely you need. You know, I don't leave the house without a spare battery if I'm going day shooting. So all right, that's it with Photo Universe, and that's where we're at today. And the bottom line is the X-Pro1 in 2016 is actually a viable camera. You got to use it in a particular way. You got to use it for a particular thing. It's not a sports camera. Think in terms of a digital Leica M that's easier to use with autofocus that works. Okay, think about the Leica M with the manual focus lenses, and now think of that, taking that and giving yourself the convenience that you always wish a Leica M had. In other words, it's a step up from a Leica M in terms of convenience and technology, but yet I don't think it impinged on the Leica, on that way of shooting. Okay, if you think of it as like not as sophisticated as a DSLR or a downgrade from a DSLR, you're going to be disappointed. If you're thinking you want to use this like a DSLR, any of them, even a Canon Rebel, you're going to be disappointed. But if you think of using this like a creative tool, like if you shoot a Leica M, and then you go to this, you know, Leica people don't freak out. You know, I know they're $20,000, and they're really cool, and they are what they are, and I get that. So is this. And for $900 for the lens and the camera right now, I mean, you know, so, yeah. So anyway, it's Ed with Funny Universe, and that's where I'm at right now. I just wanted to share this information because I'm kind of really surprised. I never thought, you told me 2 months ago that I would land on the X-Pro1. That wouldn't have made any sense to me whatsoever. But it really gets me creatively fired up. More so than any digital camera has. Which is, you know, it's kind of taken away that, it's taking the emphasis off the gear and putting it more on the creativity. Which is something I really needed to do. And it works great for me. So, Ed with Funny Universe, have a good one. Thanks. See you.